As the sun dipped below the horizon, a warm amber glow bathed Emerald Bay Airport. The terminals buzzed with energy, humming with the voices and footsteps of travelers eager to board flights destined for all corners of the world. People from all walks of life filled the bustling corridors, families wrangling restless children, businesspeople with eyes glued to their phones, backpackers loaded with gear, and honeymooners with fingers intertwined. Amidst the hurried crowd moved a tall, sharply dressed man with an air of calm confidence. Marcus Daniels, in his late 30s, cut a striking figure as he navigated through the terminal with practiced ease, a sleek black suitcase trailing behind him. Everything about him, the tailored suit, the polished shoes, the quiet but commanding presence, spoke of success. He was well known in the business community, celebrated as a strategist with a sharp mind and an innate gift for leadership. Marcus's journey had been remarkable, a climb from humble beginnings to the pinnacle of corporate influence, steering multimillion-dollar enterprises and reshaping entire industries. He had fought for every rung of the ladder, worked for every win, and now found himself at the top, respected and admired. But today, business was the last thing on his mind. He was exhausted, worn down from a week of grueling negotiations that had consumed every ounce of his energy. The deal was closed, the contracts signed, and he was ready for a break. His next stop was Paris, where he was scheduled to meet with his newly merged team, a chance to connect, recharge, and begin a new chapter. But for now, Marcus craved only one thing: a quiet, peaceful flight. He pulled his boarding pass from his pocket, glancing down at the neat print. Seat 1B, business class. Marcus often flew in business class, though he could easily afford the indulgence of first. He preferred business for its blend of efficiency and comfort, a perfect balance of luxury without unnecessary extravagance. As he neared the gate, he noticed the attendants greeting passengers ahead of him with warm smiles, welcoming each one as if they were old friends. When Marcus's turn came, he handed over his boarding pass with a polite nod. The gate agent scanned it, offered a courteous smile, and said, "Welcome aboard, Mr. Daniels." He returned the smile, grateful for the smooth process, and made his way down the jet bridge. Stepping onto the plane, he was greeted by a flight attendant, a woman in her early 40s with a friendly but professional smile. Her gaze flicked over him briefly, and though her smile remained, something in her eyes shifted, an almost imperceptible cooling of her expression. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice polite but a touch formal. "Your seat is just to the right." "Thank you," Marcus replied, sensing the slight change in her tone but choosing to ignore it. He found his seat, 1B, and stowed his carry-on in the overhead compartment. The seat was spacious and inviting, with a neatly folded blanket and a glass of fresh orange juice waiting on the armrest. He sighed, sinking into the soft leather, feeling the weight of the week begin to slip from his shoulders. This was exactly what he needed: peace, solitude, a chance to breathe. He took a sip of the juice, savoring its cool, tangy taste, and reached for his tablet, intending to skim through a few documents before takeoff. Around him, other passengers were still settling in, storing their bags and adjusting their seats, their murmurs blending with the soft hum of the engines. Just as he was about to lean back and let himself relax, Marcus noticed the flight attendant from before standing beside him again. Her smile had faded, replaced by a look of uncertainty. "Excuse me, sir," she began hesitantly. "May I see your boarding pass once more?" Marcus glanced up, puzzled. He'd already shown his pass at the gate, and no one else seemed to be getting this request. Nevertheless, he handed it over without a word, watching as she examined it, her eyes darting between the pass and his seat number, as if something didn't quite add up. "There appears to be an issue," she murmured, almost to herself, her tone uncertain. Marcus straightened in his seat, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "An issue? What do you mean?" She hesitated, glancing around as though searching for backup. then replied in a lower voice. It seems there was an error, and this seat wasn't supposed to be assigned. We'll need to relocate you to the economy cabin. The words hung in the air, strange and unwelcome. Marcus blinked, taken aback. Economy? But his boarding pass clearly stated 1B. He'd booked this seat. Paid for it. I'm sorry, he said slowly, holding back a surge of frustration. But I'm not moving to economy. I paid for this seat, and my boarding pass confirms it. I don't see why I should be the one to move. The flight attendant's expression tightened, her lips pressing into a thin line. I understand, sir, but we need your cooperation. There's a passenger who needs this seat. Marcus didn't budge. If there's been a mistake, it's not mine. I'm staying here. A few heads turned in their direction, passengers sensing the growing tension. The flight attendant's face flushed slightly as she became aware of the attention. Lowering her voice, she leaned in and said, "Please, sir, we don't want to escalate the situation." Marcus held her gaze, his voice steady but firm. "Then let's not escalate it. If there's an issue, speak to your supervisor. But I won't be downgraded because of an error that wasn't my fault." She looked at him, frustration and embarrassment mingling in her expression, before nodding curtly and stepping away. Clearly flustered, Marcus watched her retreat, his chest tight with a mixture of irritation and resolve. He had earned his place here, in this seat, and in the life he'd built for himself. He wasn't about to let anyone push him aside. As the soft hum of the engines surrounded him, Marcus leaned back, gripping the armrests, feeling the familiar sting of old wounds reopened. But he would not be made to feel out of place. Not here, not anywhere. He closed his eyes, resolved to hold his ground, no matter the cost. Marcus closed his eyes, breathing in deeply, trying to push the strange encounter out of his mind. The orange juice sat untouched on his tray, the tablet in his hand forgotten. This flight was supposed to be his chance to unwind, to let go of the exhausting week behind him and prepare for the new start awaiting him in Paris. But that moment of relaxation was gone now, disrupted by the flight attendant's uncomfortable request and the unresolved tension still hanging in the air. A subtle shift in the atmosphere caught his attention. Passengers around him were murmuring quietly, sneaking curious glances his way. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, their silent questions hanging in the air. The sudden attention made him uneasy, his mind drifting back to other times when he'd been singled out, questioned, and made to feel like he didn't belong. Determined not to let it get to him, Marcus straightened in his seat, his posture firm and resolute. He'd fought too hard to reach this point, climbed too many obstacles to be here, right here, in this seat, on this plane. He wasn't about to let anyone make him feel small. Just as he began to settle back, hoping the awkwardness would pass, the flight attendant returned. This time, her face was tense, her steps quicker, as if she was bracing herself. And beside her was a man in a crisp uniform, his expression stern and carefully neutral. Marcus guessed he must be the cabin manager. "Good evening, Mr. Daniels." The manager began, his voice smooth but strained. "I've been informed of the situation. Regrettably, we have a technical issue with the seating arrangements, and we'll need to ask you to move to the economy cabin. We're fully booked, and this seat was mistakenly assigned to multiple passengers." Marcus stared at him, disbelief tinged with frustration. This wasn't the first time his presence in a certain space had been questioned, and he knew the quiet, persistent sting of doubt when people assumed he was out of place. But this was different. He'd booked the seat, paid for it, just like any other passenger. He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I appreciate your offer, but I'm not moving. I paid for this seat, and I have every right to stay here." The cabin manager's jaw tightened ever so slightly, though his voice remained even. "I understand your position, Mr. Daniels, but we're dealing with a fully booked flight, and this seat was mistakenly assigned. We need your cooperation to resolve the situation." Marcus's eyes narrowed, his voice edged with disbelief. "So, This seat was double booked. And I'm the one being asked to move. The manager hesitated, a brief flicker of discomfort crossing his face. The pause was telling, a silent admission that perhaps this request wasn't as innocent as he wanted it to seem. Marcus could feel the weight of unspoken assumptions lingering in the air between them, the unvoiced question of whether he belonged here in the first place. "We're just trying to handle this as smoothly as possible," the manager said, his tone pleading, though his eyes didn't quite meet Marcus's. Around them, the atmosphere grew tense, passengers turning to watch the unfolding exchange with silent interest. Marcus felt their gazes, the scrutiny of strangers weighing on him, pressing down on the fragile boundary he'd built between himself and the world's judgments. But he wouldn't back down, not this time. "I'm not moving," Marcus said firmly, his voice steady. "If there's an issue, I suggest you find another solution." The manager's patience was clearly fraying, his professional facade slipping just a little. But before he could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "Is everything okay here?" Marcus turned to see a younger flight attendant approaching, her expression calm yet alert. She seemed unbothered by the growing attention, her eyes shifting between Marcus and the cabin manager with quiet confidence. The cabin manager shot her a sharp look, as if warning her to stay out of it, but she ignored it, stepping closer and offering Marcus a reassuring nod before addressing the manager directly. "We're just dealing with a seating issue," the manager said, his tone dismissive, eager to wrap things up. The younger attendant nodded politely but didn't retreat. Instead, she pulled out a sleek tablet and tapped through the seating chart, her eyes moving quickly over the screen. She paused, her eyebrows raising slightly as she checked the information, then looked back up at the cabin manager. "Actually," she said, her voice steady and even, "Mr. Daniels is in the correct seat. There's no double booking on 1B. A heavy silence fell over the cabin as her words registered, the passengers around them shifting in their seats, the quiet hum of interest thickening. The cabin manager blinked in surprise, his expression momentarily breaking as he glanced at the screen. His face flushed, a dull red creeping over his cheeks as he realized that there had been no technical issue after all, just an unwarranted assumption, or something perhaps less innocent. The younger attendant turned to Marcus, her expression filled with genuine apology. "I'm so sorry for the confusion, Mr. Daniels. You're absolutely in the right seat. There's no need for you to move." Marcus held her gaze, feeling a rush of relief tempered by the lingering bitterness of what had just happened. He nodded, forcing a smile. "Thank you," he said, his voice calm but edged with the frustration he couldn't fully hide. The cabin manager opened his mouth as if to say something, his face twisted with embarrassment, but no words came. He nodded stiffly, then turned and retreated down the aisle, leaving behind a trail of awkward silence. The younger attendant gave Marcus a small, encouraging smile before following the manager back to the galley, her calm presence a balm to the tension that still simmered within him. He watched them go, the sting of the experience lingering, a painful reminder of how easily his right to be in a space could be questioned. It was a small victory, perhaps, but the bitter taste remained, mingling with the quiet sense of triumph that came from standing his ground. As he settled back in his seat, the plane preparing to take off, Marcus let his eyes close, his body sinking into the soft leather. But his mind stayed alert, replaying the confrontation in his thoughts. He had earned his place in this seat, in this life, and he wasn't about to let anyone make him feel less than he was. Not now, and not ever. As the plane taxied down the runway, Marcus's mind lingered on the encounter, replaying the expressions, the tones, the slight but significant pauses that had communicated so much more than words. His fingers gripped the armrests tightly as the plane lifted, pushing him back into his seat as the ground fell away. He wished he could leave the frustration down there on the tarmac, let it drift off with the fading lights of the city below. But it clung to him, a stubborn weight pressing down. With a deep breath, he tried to refocus, glancing around the cabin. The other passengers had returned to their books, their screens, their conversations, but he could still feel the occasional curious glance in his direction. It was the kind of subtle attention that gnawed at his sense of peace. A quiet scrutiny he'd grown all too familiar with over the years. People's curiosity about him often came with unspoken questions and assumptions, wondering if he was in the right place, if he truly belonged here. A flight attendant came down the aisle offering beverages, her smile warm as she stopped by his seat. "Would you care for something to drink, sir?" Marcus forced a smile, trying to let her pleasant tone wash away the remnants of frustration. "Just water, please." She nodded, placing a glass of chilled water on his tray table. For a brief moment, Marcus let the coolness of the glass ground him. The tiny droplets of condensation pooling beneath his fingertips, a quiet reminder of where he was, up here, above the clouds, heading to Paris to begin a new chapter in his career. He had made it here. No one could take that away from him. As he sipped his water, the cabin lights dimmed, signaling the shift to evening mode. He settled into his seat, hoping to get some rest, but his mind was restless, caught in a loop of memories that seemed to surface unbidden. It hadn't been an easy path to reach this level of success. There had been countless late nights, setbacks, and compromises. At every step, he'd had to work harder, push further, stand his ground in ways that others around him hadn't. Yet, no matter how high he climbed, moments like this reminded him that there would always be those who questioned him, who saw him as out of place simply because he didn't fit their idea of who should be sitting in this seat, on this flight, or at this level of success. But he wouldn't let them define him. Not anymore. Just as he began to close his eyes, seeking the comfort of sleep, he felt a tap on his shoulder. Startled, he looked up to see an older woman, her face softened by a gentle smile, standing beside him. She looked like she might be in her 70s, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and a delicate string of pearls around her neck. "Excuse me, young man," she began in a quiet voice. "I couldn't help but notice what happened earlier. I want you to know, I thought you handled it with a lot of grace." Marcus blinked, surprised. He hadn't expected anyone to speak up about it, much less a stranger. "Thank you," he replied, unsure of what else to say. The woman's smile grew warmer. "It's a strange world, isn't it? Sometimes people just don't know what to make of someone who doesn't fit into their neat little boxes. But you handled it well. Keep doing what you're doing." Marcus nodded, feeling an unexpected rush of gratitude. Her words, simple but sincere, settled in his chest, softening some of the bitterness still clinging to him. "Thank you," he said again, more earnestly. "I appreciate that." The woman gave a gentle nod and patted his shoulder before returning to her seat. Marcus watched her go, feeling a little lighter, as if her words had helped him shed some of the weight he'd been carrying. It was a reminder that not everyone saw him through the same narrow lens, that there were those who recognized the hard-fought battles he'd won to be here, who saw him as more than a face or a label. As the hum of the engines filled the quiet cabin, Marcus closed his eyes, letting himself drift off at last. His thoughts turned to Paris, the city waiting for him on the other side of this flight. There, he would meet his new team, bring new ideas to life, and shape a new direction for the company he had worked so hard to build. For now, he let himself imagine the possibilities. He envisioned walking into the new office, introducing himself to his team, feeling the energy of a fresh start. He pictured himself shaking hands, strategizing with new minds, diving headfirst into the project that had been his passion for months. This was where he belonged, not just in the seat on this plane, but in every room, at every table, in every space he had earned through hard work and vision. And maybe, just maybe, his next steps would make it easier for others to sit in these spaces without question. The hum of the engines lulled Marcus into a state of near relaxation as he closed his eyes, the tension of the past hours melting away. He'd almost drifted into sleep when a shadow appeared beside him. He opened his eyes, feeling a flicker of irritation as he recognized the familiar face of the cabin manager, once again standing at his side, his expression rigid and businesslike. "Mr. Daniels," the cabin manager began, his voice formal. "I apologize, but there's still an issue with your seating arrangement. We need to ask for your cooperation in relocating you to the economy cabin." Marcus sighed, the frustration he'd managed to tamp down flaring up again. He took a deep breath, controlling his response. "As I've said before, I'm not moving. This seat is mine, paid for and confirmed. I don't see any reason I should be the one asked to move." The manager's expression hardened, though he tried to mask it behind a polite smile. "I understand, but we're dealing with a fully booked flight. And unfortunately, this seat was mistakenly assigned. We need to resolve this issue to avoid further inconvenience for all parties involved." Marcus looked him straight in the eye. "Then I suggest you resolve it with someone else. I'm staying right here." The cabin manager's jaw clenched, his professional mask slipping further. Marcus could feel the tension building. Like the charge before a storm, he braced himself, unwilling to yield, determined to hold his ground. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the thickening tension. "Excuse me, Mr. Turner," the voice said, firm and calm. Marcus turned to see a young flight attendant standing just behind the manager, her expression a blend of quiet confidence and determination. She looked directly at the cabin manager, tablet in hand, as if she'd come prepared for this exact moment. The cabin manager turned, his face showing a flash of irritation. "This is not your issue to address, Angela," he replied, his tone dismissive. But the young woman, undeterred, stepped closer, her gaze steady. "I just wanted to clarify the situation for Mr. Daniels," she said, holding up her tablet for the manager to see. Her voice was calm but edged with authority. "I reviewed the seating chart, and there's no double booking for seat 1B. Mr. Daniels is assigned to this seat, as confirmed by our system." A hush fell over the cabin. The passengers around them exchanged glances. Their curiosity piqued as they sensed the power shift unfolding before them. The cabin manager's face reddened, his jaw clenching as he scanned the tablet screen, realizing that he had no legitimate reason to keep pressing Marcus. After a long, tense moment, the manager finally looked up, his expression a forced mask of composure. "I see. Thank you, Angela." His voice was tight, barely concealing his frustration. Angela turned to Marcus, her face softening into an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Daniels. You're absolutely in the right seat, and there's no need for you to move." Marcus felt the tension in his chest ease, a small but satisfying victory settling over him. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice steady but carrying the weight of his frustration and gratitude. The cabin manager opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came. With a stiff nod, he turned and walked briskly down the aisle, his posture tense, leaving a ripple of murmurs in his wake. Angela offered Marcus a final nod of reassurance before she, too, turned and disappeared down the aisle, her calm presence lingering like a balm over the rawness of the encounter. As he settled back into his seat, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and bitterness. The encounter had left him feeling exposed, as if he'd been put on trial in front of a silent jury of his fellow passengers. He'd fought for his place in life, climbed every ladder, shattered every barrier. Yet moments like this reminded him that some people still questioned his right to be here. But tonight, he wasn't alone. Angela had stepped in, unafraid to challenge the status quo, to speak up on his behalf even when it meant going against her superior. Her quiet courage had turned the tide, defusing a situation that could have escalated into something ugly. As the plane began its ascent into the night sky, Marcus felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, change was possible, that there were people like Angela willing to stand beside him, to challenge the biases and the barriers that still lingered. It was a small victory, yes, but it was one that held the promise of something greater. He looked out the window as the stars began to appear, his mind shifting from the discomfort of the evening to the possibilities awaiting him in Paris. With Angela's quiet bravery in mind, Marcus resolved to carry his own strength forward, to ensure that next time, there would be no question of where he belonged, not just on this plane, but in every room he entered. For the rest of the flight, as the cabin lights dimmed and the plane soared above the clouds, Marcus sat in silence, feeling the quiet power of his own resilience growing stronger, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The gentle glow of the cabin lights bathed Marcus in a soft, calming warmth as he sat back, his heartbeat finally settling into a steady rhythm. He had won, and while it was a small victory, felt monumental in the moment. He took a slow, steady breath, letting the relief flow through him as the plane leveled out and the hum of the engines became a comforting lull. But the tension lingered. Moments like these never left entirely. They left imprints, silent reminders of the invisible battle he fought every day. Marcus had learned long ago that even his successes didn't always protect him from scrutiny. From the looks, the assumptions, the quiet tests of his right to be in certain spaces, he'd thought it would get easier over time, that each new achievement would shield him a little more. But no matter how high he climbed, the barriers only seemed to shift, never fully disappearing. He felt a soft tap on his shoulder and turned to see the same older woman who had spoken to him earlier. She leaned in, her face warm with empathy. "I just wanted to tell you again, you handled that well. It's not easy standing your ground in situations like these." He smiled, feeling a flicker of gratitude. "Thank you. It means a lot to hear that." The woman gave him a gentle nod. "Sometimes the hardest battles are the quiet ones, aren't they?" She patted his shoulder and returned to her seat, her words settling over him like a quiet blessing. Marcus watched her go, thinking about how even a stranger's kindness could make the weight of these moments a little lighter. As the flight continued, Marcus took out his tablet, intending to review some final notes on the upcoming merger. But his mind kept drifting, replaying the evening's events, unable to fully let go. He knew he wasn't just sitting in this seat as Marcus Daniels, businessman. He was sitting here as every person who had ever been made to feel as if they didn't belong. Every person who had to work twice as hard to be seen, to be heard, to hold onto their place in the world. And tonight, he wasn't the only one who'd taken a stand. He thought about Angela, the young flight attendant who had stepped in with quiet but resolute determination. Her courage had been as vital to this victory as his own. She had seen through the veneer of protocol and unspoken prejudice, standing up against it with nothing but truth. Her actions had been subtle but powerful, and they had affirmed for Marcus something he often questioned in these moments. He wasn't alone in this fight. A new determination settled over him, steady and fierce, as he gazed out of the window at the dark, endless expanse of sky. He felt his thoughts take on a sharper focus. This merger he was flying to finalize, this new chapter in Paris, it was about more than just expanding business. He would be a key player in shaping the culture of this airline, and he realized, now more than ever, how important that would be. He couldn't change everyone's biases, but he could make sure that the next person who looked like him, who fought like him, would find fewer obstacles in their path. The flicker of an idea sparked in his mind, growing into a vision for what this new role could mean. He imagined implementing policies to ensure better training for the crew, creating guidelines that would promote respect and inclusivity. He pictured himself standing in front of his new team, explaining why these changes mattered, drawing from his own experiences, sharing his story not as a tale of struggle but as a testament to resilience and dignity. As the cabin lights dimmed, signaling the approach of midnight, Marcus leaned back, letting the sense of purpose settle over him like a warm blanket. The taste of victory had been bittersweet, but it was a reminder of why he was here. Every hardship, every moment of doubt, had prepared him for this, an opportunity not just to succeed, but to pave a smoother path for others. In a few days, He would meet with the company's executives and finalize the merger. He would take his place at the table not just as a business strategist but as an advocate for change. A voice for those who might never get a chance to sit in his seat. And in time, he would ensure that their presence would no longer be questioned. With a final glance out at the night sky, Marcus closed his eyes, a quiet, resolute smile on his face. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt prepared to face whatever came next, knowing he was exactly where he belonged. As the hours slipped by, the cabin grew quieter, the gentle hum of the engines the only sound in the stillness. Marcus leaned back, allowing his thoughts to wander as he stared out the window at the vast stretch of night sky. There was something grounding about being up here, floating thousands of feet above the earth, a temporary reprieve from the world below. The confrontation with the cabin manager and the subtle weight of prejudice he'd felt that evening began to fade, leaving room for a deeper sense of clarity. He hadn't asked for the world to see him differently overnight. He knew change was slow, a chisel chipping away at granite, inch by inch. Yet, tonight had reminded him of the journey he'd taken to get here, and how each challenge had shaped him. As he sipped the last of his water, his mind drifted back to his beginnings, a small apartment he shared with his family. The sound of his mother's laughter as she spun stories about all he would become. She'd always believed in his potential, even when he'd been too young to understand it himself. It was her faith that had fueled him, her words echoing in his mind when the world felt stacked against him. He remembered late nights hunched over textbooks, his dreams a beacon pulling him forward. He'd grown accustomed to pushing through obstacles, to working twice as hard to make his mark. And through it all, he had promised himself that if he ever achieved success, he would lift others along the way. Tonight's experience, though unsettling, had reignited that promise within him. It was more than just a vow to his past self, it was a responsibility to the future. With a renewed sense of focus, Marcus picked up his tablet and opened a blank document. He began drafting ideas, outlining policies and training initiatives that could foster a culture of inclusivity within the airline. He envisioned workshops for the crew, real conversations about bias, empathy, and the power of respect. These changes wouldn't happen overnight, but he knew from experience that the smallest steps could lead to the greatest transformations. As he typed, Marcus felt the plane dip slightly, signaling the start of its descent. He glanced at the clock. They were due to land in Paris in under an hour. The city lights, he knew, would be glowing beneath them soon, a vibrant, sprawling landscape of opportunity waiting to greet him. A quiet thrill spread through him as he thought about what lay ahead. Paris would be the beginning of something bigger than just a business venture. This was his chance to create a legacy, not just for himself, but for every person who had ever felt as if they were made to feel out of place. His work would be about more than profits and growth. It would be about people and purpose. The intercom crackled, and a soft voice announced their descent, bringing him back to the present. He closed his tablet, leaning back into his seat with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. The weight of the evening's tension had been transformed into purpose, each challenge sharpening his resolve. As the lights of Paris flickered into view, Marcus gazed out the window, his reflection staring back at him, a man shaped by his battles, stronger and more resilient for them. He felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that he was right where he belonged, not just in this seat, but in this moment, on the cusp of something transformative. Tomorrow, he would step into his new role with a vision that extended far beyond the boardroom. He would build a culture of respect, a workplace where everyone could take their seat with pride, unburdened by unspoken doubts or questions of belonging. The plane touched down smoothly, rolling to a gentle stop. Marcus felt his heart swell with the excitement of the new beginning that lay ahead. As he gathered his things, he whispered a quiet promise to himself and to every person he hoped to help. "I will be the change I needed." And with that, Marcus stepped off the plane, ready to claim his place not just as a leader, but as a force for dignity, progress, and hope. Paris welcomed Marcus with a crisp dawn, the first hints of sunlight casting a golden glow over the city. The air was cool, fresh, and invigorating, as if the very essence of new beginnings lingered in the breeze. As he stepped out of the terminal, taking in the sight of the iconic architecture and the energy that pulsed through the city, he felt a renewed sense of purpose settle over him. The car waiting for him whisked him through the winding streets, each turn unveiling glimpses of the city's timeless beauty, the stone facades, intricate ironwork balconies, and the bustling cafes that were just beginning to open their doors for the day. This was the heart of Paris, the city where he would build something lasting, something meaningful. His destination was the headquarters of Airline, the airline he had recently acquired a significant stake in. It was here that his vision would begin to take shape. Today marked his first meeting with the executive team, and though he knew he would be entering a room full of seasoned professionals, he felt ready, prepared not only by his years of experience but by the quiet resolve shaped in him the night before. As he arrived at the building, he took a moment to pause at the entrance, the sleek glass doors reflecting his image back at him. Marcus Daniels, he reminded himself, not just a businessman, but a builder of something greater. He squared his shoulders, breathed in deeply, and stepped through the doors. Inside, the lobby was bustling with employees, a mix of executives and staff moving with the brisk energy of a new day. He was met by Emma Dubois, the company's senior vice president, a poised, confident woman with a warm but discerning gaze. "Mr. Daniels, welcome to Airline." She greeted him, her smile professional yet friendly. "We're honored to have you with us." "Thank you, Emma. I'm looking forward to meeting the team," Marcus replied, his voice steady and calm. She led him through a maze of hallways until they reached the boardroom, where the executive team was already gathered. As he entered, every face turned to him with a mix of curiosity and respect. They'd read about his success, heard of his strategic mind, and were now ready to see the man in action. He could sense a few skeptical glances, people sizing him up, questioning whether he belonged here, whether he could bring meaningful change. But Marcus had long learned to meet such looks with composure, knowing that true respect came with action, not assumption. He took his place at the head of the table, and the meeting began. They discussed projections, outlined growth strategies, reviewed the details of the merger, topics Marcus could navigate in his sleep. But as the meeting wore on, he sensed an underlying tension, an invisible line drawn between the business priorities they were accustomed to and the changes he had come to implement. Finally, Marcus leaned forward, folding his hands in front of him. "I want to talk about our culture," he began, his voice steady but commanding attention. "This merger isn't just about expanding markets or increasing profitability. It's about creating an environment where every passenger feels respected, and every employee feels valued. I'm not just here to increase Air Mondes' market share. I'm here to help set a new standard in the industry." He paused, letting his words sink in, observing the mixed reactions. Some executives looked intrigued, nodding thoughtfully, while others exchanged skeptical glances. He knew it was a bold statement, but he had spent his life proving that boldness was necessary for change. Marcus continued, "I want to implement new training programs for our crew and staff, programs that focus on empathy, inclusivity, and respect for all passengers, regardless of background. We'll be setting up workshops, bringing in experts on unconscious bias, and creating a workplace where respect and dignity are at the forefront of everything we do." A hand went up from across the table. It was Andre, a senior operations manager, his expression both respectful and cautious. "Mr. Daniels, with all due respect, we've been running this airline successfully for years. We've trained our employees thoroughly. Are you sure this focus on cultural sensitivity is necessary?" Marcus met his gaze, his own expression unwavering. "I believe it's essential, Andre. The airline industry is more than logistics and service. It's about connecting people, making every passenger feel welcome and valued. And that starts with our team. He shared the story of his recent flight, recounting the incident with a calm but unflinching honesty. He didn't need to embellish. The details were enough. He described the assumptions made about him, the discomfort of being questioned when he had every right to be in his seat. The room grew still as he spoke, his words drawing them into the experience, into the feeling of being singled out, made to feel as though he didn't belong. "This isn't just about me," he concluded. "It's about creating a world where everyone, no matter their appearance, background, or station, can walk into a space and feel like they belong there. If we want to be the airline of the future, we need to lead that change, to be at the forefront of empathy and inclusivity." The room remained silent for a moment, the weight of his words settling over the team. Slowly, he saw nods of understanding, a shift in posture, an awareness that perhaps there was something greater they could achieve together. Emma, who had been listening intently, was the first to speak. "I think I can speak for everyone here, Mr. Daniels, when I say that your story resonated with us. This initiative, this vision of inclusivity, it's something we can all stand behind. Change is never easy, but it's necessary if we want to lead the industry." A murmur of agreement echoed around the table, and Marcus felt a sense of satisfaction growing within him. They were seeing it, feeling it, understanding the purpose behind the change he was proposing. The meeting wrapped up with a renewed energy, the team exchanging ideas and enthusiasm for the path ahead. As the room began to empty, Emma approached him, her gaze warm with admiration. "You have a way of bringing people together, Marcus. This vision, it's inspiring. I think we're all ready to see where you'll lead us." He smiled, the sense of fulfillment settling over him like a calm sea. "Thank you, Emma. I'm honored to be here, and I'm committed to making this vision a reality." As he left the boardroom, walking through the halls of Airmond, Marcus felt a deep sense of purpose filling every step. He was here for more than just business. He was here to make a difference, to build a legacy that would redefine what it meant to belong. And for the first time, he felt certain that he wasn't just opening doors for himself, but for countless others who would one day walk through those doors without hesitation, without doubt, and without question of their place. Today was only the beginning. In the weeks that followed, Marcus settled into his new role at Airmond with a resolve that rippled through every corner of the company. He wasn't just another executive implementing standard procedures. He was a leader with a vision, and he was determined to make it real. The first step was launching the new employee training initiative, designed not just to address technical aspects of airline service but to delve deep into human connection, empathy, and respect. Marcus led the first session himself, standing in front of a room filled with staff members, sharing his story and the vision he had for Airmond. His words carried weight, a quiet power that was both captivating and unyielding. "We're not just here to move people from one place to another," he said, his voice steady and warm. "We're here to create a world where every person, regardless of their background, feels respected, valued, and seen. This is more than a job, it's a mission, a commitment to being part of something bigger than ourselves." The staff listened intently, some nodding, others visibly moved. By the end of the session, the atmosphere in the room had shifted, transformed by the authenticity and sincerity of his words. Marcus saw in their faces a spark of understanding, a recognition that they were part of something meaningful, something that went beyond routine responsibilities. He watched as Angela, the young flight attendant who had stood up for him on that pivotal flight, took a leading role in the training sessions. Her dedication and kindness had become an inspiration to others, and she embraced her new role with enthusiasm, encouraging her colleagues to join her in reshaping Airmond's culture. As Marcus walked through the airline's headquarters each day, he saw the change taking root. People greeted each other with warmth and respect. Interactions became more mindful, and a new sense of pride seemed to emanate from every team member. His vision was no longer just an idea, it was becoming a reality. a palpable shift that touched every level of the company. But Marcus knew the journey was far from over. With each meeting, each training session, and each policy update, he laid another brick in the foundation of the legacy he was building. He worked tirelessly, collaborating with executives, listening to employees, and shaping initiatives that reached beyond Airmonde's walls. One of his most ambitious projects was an industry-wide summit he organized, inviting executives and leaders from airlines across the world to discuss inclusivity, bias, and the future of air travel. He wanted Airmonde to set a precedent, to be a catalyst for change throughout the entire industry. It was a bold move, but he knew that the conversations sparked here could ripple outward, influencing the standards of countless airlines. The summit took place in a grand ballroom in Paris, filled with leaders from across the globe. As Marcus stood at the podium, the room buzzing with anticipation, he felt a deep sense of pride. He opened with a story, not a story of profits or expansion, but of the small, often overlooked moments when passengers felt unwelcome, unseen, and undervalued. "We have the power to change that," he said, his voice resonating through the hall. "It's up to us, as leaders, to ensure that everyone who steps onto our planes feels like they belong. This isn't just good business. It's the right thing to do." The audience was captivated, some nodding in agreement, others taking notes. By the end of the summit, Marcus had garnered the support of multiple airlines willing to adopt similar training programs, to reconsider their hiring practices, and to prioritize inclusivity as a core value. It was a victory not just for him, but for every future traveler who would benefit from the changes being set into motion. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Emma found Marcus, her face beaming with pride. "You've done it, Marcus," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "You've started something that's going to change this industry." He smiled, a mix of gratitude and fulfillment washing over him. "This is only the beginning, Emma. There's still so much work to do, but I'm grateful to be here, to be part of this journey." Over the following months, Marcus's impact continued to grow, not just within Airmonde but across the industry. His story became an inspiration, a reminder of resilience and the power of standing up for what's right. His vision had sparked a movement, a call for respect and dignity that extended beyond the walls of Airmonde, beyond the skies they traveled. In the quiet moments, Marcus often thought back to that flight, to the seat he'd fought for, and the feeling of not being seen. It was the driving force behind every decision he made, every policy he championed. He had turned a moment of exclusion into a legacy of inclusion, transforming an encounter born from prejudice into a movement grounded in empathy and justice. One day, as he was preparing for yet another board meeting, he received a note, a handwritten card from Angela. Inside was a simple message: "Thank you for making Airmonde a place where we all belong." Marcus held the card, feeling a surge of gratitude, a quiet but powerful reminder of why he'd taken this path. He had fought not just for a seat on a plane but for a seat at the table, for a place where voices like his, and those of countless others, could be heard and respected. As he looked out over the city from his office, the sprawling skyline glistening in the afternoon sun, he felt a sense of peace, a knowing that his work had truly made a difference. Marcus Daniels had set out to prove he belonged, but in doing so, he'd built a legacy that would ensure everyone else could feel that sense of belonging too. And as he turned back to his work, he knew that his journey wasn't over. There would always be more doors to open, more minds to change, and more lives to uplift. But for now, he was exactly where he was meant to be, leading with purpose, guided by resilience, and leaving a legacy of hope, respect, and unshakable dignity.